Greetings, one and all. I see people in the Discord channel right now waiting for CouchBot to spring its trap. It's not really a trap. It's an invitation, really. It's an invitation to come on in the house. Come on in the house and let's do our Figma thing. It's a special edition of the weekly workshop. Thanks everybody for dealing with the slight delay. I just knew nobody was going to come in the middle of a debate night on impeachment week to a evening workshop. So we moved it back, and I'm waiting on the CouchBot to kick in, so we're not leaving the station without anybody. CouchBot will probably kick in 3, 2, 1, and I'll see it pop up over here in Discord, and then we will leave the station with this one. We can always go back and edit this in post if anybody is actually watching right now. I know Shane and Fonzo are waiting at the door. Come on, CouchBot, fire away. I'm basically just holding now, waiting for CouchBot to. Anytime now, CouchBot. I'm actually going to go check YouTube just to make sure that CouchBot is not broken. It's definitely taking longer than it normally does. Actually, we'll just go right here. And when we refresh, we will see. Come on. Fire away, CouchBot. Let us know that we're live. We are live. So CouchBot appears to have a hiccup, but we are definitely live. I'm going to go ahead and copy a link to the stream. Oh, well, of course, as I get ready to copy a link to the stream, CouchBot fires away. Goodness gracious, CouchBot. Why you gotta have me hanging out here like that? Anyway, Chris Courtney here, New Pragmatic. Now that CouchBot has done its thing, we can get our weekly workshop underway. Thank you, CouchBot. You're quite helpful. If you're following along in the Discord channel, I do see a few of you over there milling about. Feel free to ask questions as we go. Tonight we get to play with one of my favorite toys. It's Figma, and obviously there's a lot of different directions we could go with Figma, but tonight I wanted to specifically focus on ways that we can really utilize Figma for typography. And when I was doing a little bit of research, kind of gathering my thoughts for this session, I stumbled across a few things that I was previously unaware of. One of the things that I've discovered over the years, and it's been literally years now that I've been using Figma, is that there is a distinct difference in how typography works between the desktop version and the web version. So I'm going to go ahead and shift my screen over. So let's shift that over. And if you've ever worked with Figma, and we will actually use Figma here. If you've ever worked with Figma, what you'll know right away is that anytime you select this type tool, a world of opportunity opens up for you. And it may seem just magical how many typefaces that you have available to you just out of the box. Anybody who ever grew up in some of these are not quite even showing up, but anybody who grew up with Adobe tools will know, it was a constant act of seeking out new typography, and that's simply not the case anymore. Figma, anything that's available in Google Fonts is available in Figma. The two are just coupled together automatically. That means that anything that I might discover over in Google Fonts which we will do right now. Let's come over here to Google Fonts, and we'll go to Google Fonts, and go ahead and plug that in. Here we are. So anything that we find, we could find a really random font. For instance, I will look for Slabo. Okay, let's look for Slabo. Slabo, I've never heard of it before. Let's just see if it's available. And what we should find is if I type in Slabo. I've never installed Slabo, but lo and behold, let's go ahead and blow up old Slabo. That is Slabo. If I wanted to confirm that that is Slabo, I could sit here and let's go ahead and open that specimen up. And this is Slabo. Let's just look at the S here on Slabo. And if we look at that S is indeed Slabo. I think it's really interesting that without much effort at all, and there appear to be two different weights here of Slabo, but without much effort at all, something that I just randomly picked out of a hat on Google Fonts was already available inside of Figma. This can lead to a lot of really terrible typography, to be completely honest with you. If I go back over here to Google Fonts, and let's purposely find a terrible font. And fonts aren't terrible just because of the way they're created. Fonts typically are used it's about usage. So I apologize if I'm about to pick on your favorite font, but I'm going to come through and I'm going to go ahead and look at categories, and I'm going to say that I'm looking for let's go for a display font, and we will go with, what is something that I know that I have not installed? You know what? Vibes. I am pretty certain that I have not installed Vibes. So let's come back over, and I'm going to type in Vibes. And Vibes did not show up. Okay, that's interesting. And look at that. Vibes is not there. Interesting. Interesting, because it's clearly available right here on ye old Figma. So I'm going to select this font. I'm just going to dig into this for just a second, because it was my understanding that if it was available inside of Google Fonts, that it was available inside of, so local font files will affect the way websites are displayed on your machine. So let's go ahead and use Sky Fonts. Sky Fonts, for anybody who is familiar with utilizing Google Fonts, will know that you can install Sky Fonts. I already have it installed. It's actually right here. But I'm going to say Browse Google Fonts. And now I'm going to go for Vibes. And if I spell it correctly, all right, so there is Vibes. I'm going to say Sky Fonts, add the entire family. I'm going to add it. So now Sky Fonts is added. It's on my computer. I can utilize it. So I'm going to say OK, and I'm done. And now I will go back to, my fonts. I've got Vibes in here. I'll come back over here, and I will look for Vibes one more time. It did not take. And I suspect what I will need to do here is I will need to restart. So I'm going to go ahead and quit Figma, because we're doing, it's a live workshop. We're workshopping this. We're going to restart Figma. And now I'm just going to check OBS. Yes, we are sharing our screen. Now that we've got this open, you can see I got a lot of student work here. I'm going to go back into this untitled document, and let's see what Vibes has to offer for us. Sorry about the noise in the background. Just taking Figma just a half second longer than I would like to load this evening. And come on, Figma, you can do it. This is what happens when I have just too many files open. It takes a second. All right, so now we've got Figma. Reload it. Let's go ahead and highlight this. Let's look for vibes, and there is our quirky vibes. That is the terrible power of being able to call in typography at a snap. But what is interesting about that is it was my understanding that everything that was in Google was available just automatically. That's not the case. But as we just saw, if we go over to Sky Fonts and install it, right there Vibes was. Let's do that one more time. I want to try to locate one more font that isn't already available inside of Figma. So, and this could be, there's 2,800 fonts in Google. So let's go ahead and do this. So Google, give me Press Start. Press Start is clearly a throwback to gaming culture. So I'm going to go look for Press Start over here in Figma. Oh my God, Press Start is already, wouldn't you know? The one time the one clearly bad, like that's not a great font, but there it is. Let's go ahead and find another one. Black Ops 1. That looks pretty heinous. Let's go ahead and get ourselves into Black Ops 1. So let's look for Black Ops. And wouldn't you know it, Black Ops 1 is also available. So, a little hit and miss. But what that should show you is that a large number of the fonts that you can find in Google, even though I've never installed Black Ops 1, it's automatically available. Most of the time, I live my life over here in the realm of like Playfair, display, things like that. Love a good Playfair display combination with maybe a little Montserrat. Yeah, we'll kick this in here and we'll say Montserrat. And let's go ahead and put that in regular, maybe 24. And when you're in here and you're working with typography and you're trying to get it to pair up, it's always good to have like some content to work with. This is where a plugin like Lorem Ipsum could come in. I'm gonna just gonna generate, and there you go. So we've got a nice little combination here. Our purpose this evening isn't necessarily to identify good pairing. We're actually going to spend most of our time looking at just the functional aspects of Figma. And one of the things that I want to point out right away is that there are fonts that are available on my local machine that are not available on your local machine. One of those fonts that if you were to open up Figma on your machine, one of those fonts that you wouldn't see, it's called Circular. There's Circular. Circular, for those of you, and I would never really pair it with Montserrat, so I'm just going to change this to Circular as well, although I'll leave it as Book. Circular is better known by a lot of people as the Airbnb font. So if you've ever seen the Airbnb design system or the website, Circular is a paid font that you'd have to buy a copy of it and download it to your local machine. You wouldn't necessarily have it available through a service like Google Fonts, for instance. So when I go to share this a Figma file, not necessarily this one because I haven't really saved this, but if I were to go share this file with you, if you're watching this, what you would notice is that Playfair Display and Montserrat would show up just fine for you. But it wouldn't show, but Circular, while you would be able to see it, you would not be able to edit it. You would not be able to do anything with it. And it's because you wouldn't have a copy of that typography. So because you lack a copy of the typeface, this would cause an issue. And this I mention this because it's an important breakpoint that you need to be aware of when you're sharing files with other people. You might be in the program here at New Pragmatic. You might be working with a client. If you're sharing something that has a font that has to be downloaded and installed on your local machine, it's not something that exists online, you have to include it and send it along with them so that they can have a copy of that font as well. And there are all sorts of rules and regulations around who can have that font installed on what machines. So it's a lot deeper than just give them a copy of the font, but understand that if you're working with fonts that are on your local machine, it's going to potentially cause an issue. That is not me making a stance on you should always use Google Fonts. I think there is a lot of great typography out there that is protected by licensing agreements that you're really required to buy. There's a lot of great typography that should be purchased. But understand that if you're working in Figma and you're sharing files, if it's on your local machine and not available online or not available in a common repository, then you could have display issues. Also, if you're in the Discord channel, and I saw many of you poking around just a moment ago, feel free to ask questions as we go. I'm happy to have you riding along with me. The other thing I wanted to point out is we had this discussion about local and web fonts. Figma has a unique break that is uncommon amongst most graphical design programs, in that Sketch, you have to download the application to your device, to your laptop, and you can use your local fonts. Adobe products, you download and you install them and you use your local fonts. Figma works the same way. You can download the desktop app and use the local fonts. But I wanted to take a second to get back to this. And it is that if I go to Figma, let's just go to figma.com. It's going to open up one of my files probably because I've got a string here that's already in the URL. If you go into Figma in the browser, you have to ask yourself how, this is an example page that I was working on for another project, but how would I get access to Circular? So there's Circular. Circular is not a web font. Circular is available on my local machine. But I'm online. I'm on the web right now. This is a web browser. This is Firefox. So if I'm in Firefox, but I'm using Circular on my local machine, how am I doing that? And the answer is easy. There is an install, a local font helper, Figma font helper, that allows you to utilize local fonts even when you're in the browser. Now, this is something that will trip you up if you're a user of the desktop app and suddenly you move and you use the browser. I find myself opening up files. People will send links over and they'll open in Firefox right away because my computer's just set up to automatically open links in Firefox. Firefox is a really great browser. But in doing that, if I don't have this local font helper installed, this is going to break because somebody could send me something with Circular in it, or I could even send myself something. I could open up something I've created in the desktop app, in the browser version of Figma, and it would break if I did not have this Figma font helper installed. So that's something I think is overlooked, and depending on how you come in, depending on how you come into using Figma. For me, there wasn't a desktop app available when I started using Figma. So I started using Figma just in the browser. So because of that, I naturally had to install the local font helper, the Figma font helper, because I wanted to use my local fonts. I did not even realize that the desktop app wasn't utilizing that Figma font helper until much later. Much later, I discovered from talking with somebody else that this font helper is for the browser only. But it's something to note, particularly if you are not installing Figma on your local machine. It is also important to note that Linux and Chrome OS or Chromebooks, you can't use local fonts. I'm not even really sure how you would host local fonts on a Chromebook. I'm not smart enough to use a Linux machine, so I will leave that to somebody else's pay grade. Probably Fonzo. Fonzo's probably watching, and Fonzo would probably know. So with that bit of housekeeping out of the way, and it is an important bit of housekeeping, we've discussed local fonts, web fonts, what you can find from Google, and how to get it from Google if it isn't already there. And that again is coming up here and utilizing Sky Fonts. Let's actually, yep, Fonzo. Hey Fonzo, good to see you, man. And by the way, if you're watching this later, every time we do these workshops, we're utilizing Discord for our communication. So if you have questions as we're going, feel free to bring them on in. Let's jump into Figma though, because I want to talk about the tooling of Figma and look specifically at the different ways that you can bring typography in. So this type tool is pretty robust, even though it looks fairly plain, to be honest with you. If I click anywhere, it's going to pick up the last font that I had. Of course, the last font I had was circular, and it begins typing at 72, and I could type until I'm blue in the face, and it's just going to go all the way across the screen. And that's because the bounding box is basically saying, hey, just go with whatever typography this is. So if I wanted a different experience, if I did not want this sort of long, and as you can see, I've typed for seemingly ever here. If I didn't want that experience, I could always come in, we'll zoom back in, I could always come in and click and drag. And by clicking and dragging instead of just the simple click, that sets the bounding box that's going to naturally tell this typography to wrap. Now, as you can see, it broke there, and it's because it has a break in the gobbledygook that I have typed in. But you get an idea that the bounding box has some ability to control the typography, and that's a click and drag. That's how we've always done it. One thing that I have not really spent a lot of time using, and it's only something I've recently discovered, is there's a lot of bounding box adjustments that can be made here. So in this particular version, I have a fixed size, and I've drug my text typography box to the point that the typography is now bleeding off and down below the box. I can change and resize that to grow vertically, and that changes the bounding box to encapsulate all the typography that I have. Now, a question you may have is what happens if you keep typing? Well, now the box grows with it. Equally, it shrinks with it if I have moved it. Now let's change this and grow horizontally, and as you see, the same thing happens that happened before. If you're curious, and you may be if you're like me, what's going to happen to this when we grow vertically? Well, nothing happens when we grow vertically because we never had a width to grow down, but we can change that. And as you can see now, it just naturally starts getting taller. So you can resize these bounding boxes. If at some point you've clicked over here, you've said, hey, I've got this, and now I decided I don't want it to be just a horizontal box. I want it to grow vertically, or I want it to set in at a fixed size. You can make that adjustment later. And it's really easy to do. So that is just one little tip about the type tool and the different ways that you can begin using the typography tool. One is a simple click, and when you do that, you get a horizontal box. The other is a click and drag, and when you do that, you get a bounding box, and that bounding box is going to be set to that specific size, but you can change that after the fact. So that's something that's good to know. I can't tell you how many times I've had situations where I've had typography that's just gone over, and nothing else adjusts. It's particularly important to allow these elements to grow and shrink as needed, because when you begin to create responsive components later, and we'll talk about that in a later workshop, the ability for this bounding box to grow as the content changes the overall shape of the component that it's associated with. Figma is just a lot smarter than your old page makers or illustrators or InDesigns. So understanding the basics of these typography tools is really, really helpful. Another thing that is helpful is the fact that while this is just a blank file, there's nothing really going on here of note. Figma makes it really easy to start a new file and call typography styles into it. And to get this started, I'm going to go ahead and create a frame. In this frame, I'm going to make it a desktop frame. I'll go ahead and zoom in here. And I'm going to go to Assets. And inside of this Assets panel, you can, this is typically where you would see components. So as we create components do show up here. But there's also this library function. And the library function I find to be really interesting because it allows us to pull in styles that have been published from other sources. So if I click in here, I can see that my current file is called Entitle. I have no components or styles, but I have a case study wireframe, I have personal colors, I have Tegel's branding backup. I have all of these files available to me. For this particular version, I haven't actually published the changes that have been made to this video components file. And this video components file is pretty important to me because if you've watched any of the tutorials that I do, you will sometimes notice that I have overlays that happen in the background, or that I have previews that pop up on screen that preview on, they're little thumbnails for YouTube. And I have styles that are created for that. Now, right as of this moment, you probably noticed there is nothing for video components available here. There's no file here that says video components. I'm going to change that because we have styles that are created, and I have decided that I want to be able to use those in this new file. So I'm going to go over here to Assets. I'm going to go to Team Library, and I'm going to publish video components. And it will say Team Library Professional only. Sorry, I want it to not publish components. I want it to publish. Components wasn't my goal there. My goal was the styles, and I should be able to do my styles. Enable library for team members. I've published that. Let's go ahead and, let's go ahead and do case study wireframe while we're here. And what this has gotten us is it has unlocked a number of styles and colors that we previously did not have access to. So if I come down here now and I look over here at well, it seems like that should have just automatically updated for me. Let's go ahead and, oh, it's because I'm not in layers. We'll come back over here to YouTube. Now if I click down here, let's go ahead and just make a new shape. So I'll make a new file here. I'll begin typing into it. Now if I highlight and come back over here, you will see that I have all of these styles available for me. Yeah, Shane, all those styles, I have it right here available. And these probably look pretty familiar to you. So if you have created styles in one of your pages, so here we are in libraries. This case study wireframe, that's yours. If we look over here, these are all of your files, your styles and your color tiles. Those have been enabled for usage elsewhere. I think it's really interesting to see how that works. How you can draw other typographical styles into your work. And then if I decided to, okay, so that's one headline. I'm gonna enter some more text here, and I will make this some sort of subhead. Let's make that regular or small body text. All right. So this is how you can begin to basically have one file that has all of your styles in it and allow yourself to make changes and adjustments to other files through that one centralized file. So that's a way to call in styles really easily. I'm going to go ahead and publish this publicly. Actually, I don't want to do that right this second. We will come back to this in just a moment. That's just changing it from grid to other. That's components, assets, and updates. All right, so we're going to zoom out of this for a second. Actually, while we're here, why don't we just stay here for a second? Because there is something that I haven't touched on yet, but it's a big issue for most people when they're getting started, and it's this. I'm going to go ahead and break this away from its style. I'm going to break both of these away from their predetermined styles. Working with text as components. Yes, I sure can. The first thing I was going to do though is I'm going to highlight this subhead here. It's Roboto, it's bold, it's 24, and that's great. But if I was doing exploration here, and I wanted to test out, let's test out this redacted. All right, redacted is a black line. Let's test out Radley. Let's test out PT Sans. As you can tell, this is getting old very fast. I can't tell what this really looks like. I'm having to basically just guess, and what that does is it pretty much guarantees that you're only going to use like 3 or 4 typefaces that you feel comfortable with. The solution here, if you're wanting to really explore really quick, and you're not necessarily wanting to just constantly go to Google Fonts, there's something called Better Font Picker. And Better Font Picker, what I have found is that if you will give it a minute to load, it will provide you with accurate previews of everything that's in the file. So right now, like, this doesn't look like it's changed at all, and in fact it hasn't. But that's because it's loading like hundreds of font. Yes, Better Font Picker. It's loading hundreds of fonts, and as you'll notice, like as you go down, like you begin to see that there are changes that are coming in, like Athlea's here, and Avenir. Avenir is lovely typeface. Avenir next condensed. These typefaces, if you will give them time to load, and as you can see, it's struggling just a little bit. Better Font Picker is fantastic when given enough time to actually process the typography. And then you can see the difference between Georgia and Graduate. without necessarily having to look at them and wait, having to just individually select them. Like, I don't want you to ever use Herculeum. Just like, don't do it. But Hoffler text, hell yeah, Hoffler text is one of my favorite all-time serifs. So Better Font Picker gives you a really great way to sort through typography. But if you just understand, if you have a lot of typography, it's going to take it a little while before you'll get the previews that actually mean something. So just give it time to load. Don't give up on it just because it hasn't just automatically loaded everything. And if you do, you'll be able to see the difference between Chalk Duster and Comic Sans and Circular without going through doing it the old manual way of up and down without a real preview. And I really wish that this is something that Figma would roll into the product, but they just haven't. I don't necessarily know if they will, but it's lovely to know that there is a something like Better Font Picker out there to work with. Now, Shane had a question related to working with typography inside of components, and I wanted to touch on that for a second because I think it's something that's really important to note. As I typically go through and begin building components, if you've seen the YouTube channel, you've seen these shapes before. Okay, a lot of times I create my first bits of typography, my first bits of typographic style inside of an existing component. What I don't do typically is I don't necessarily come over and I'll say tutorial headline. Yes, thank you, Better Font Picker. That's the one. And again, give it time to load. I didn't think it really worked very well the first few times through, and then I gave it a moment, and it will load what you want to see. I'm going to go ahead and break this away from its initial, and I'm going to change this. Let's go with Avenir, because I've been fanboying on Avenir for the last little bit. So Avenir, I'm going to go ahead and just do it in Roman. I'm going to say it's 48. And this, actually, let's make it black. So this will also make it all caps, and I'm going to track it out a little bit as well. And we will talk about these tools in just a moment. But here I have what is really, by and large, a label. It's a label that goes above typography. I'll change it to 24 so it's really a label. What I typically won't do is I won't typically try to, I won't typically try to make a component out of this. I will come over, and in my text styles, I will say section label. Okay, and now section label is available, and it happens to be this Avenir all caps heavyweight at 24 pixels. But there's no need to come through and say, okay, and this, I'll put it over here for safekeeping, this is a component of some sort, because we don't drag things over like that for our typography. That's not how we typically do it. If we're going to drag anything over as a component, we drag over large units, and these units are pre-built together. So what I tend to do, and I'm going to break this instance. I don't want to swap the instance. I just want it to not be a component. Well, not so much. Detach instance. Oh, I can just delete it. I can delete it, and I don't need it, because all I really have to do is, anytime I bring in some typography, I can come down here, and it's going to say section label. But I can come in and I can pull in my styles. So for me, I want styles that matter. These text styles, that's what really matters to me. And then I will build shapes around them. So let's just go ahead and build a style for a story promo. So there's my label overline. My next piece of the component is going to be this workshop headline. And I do think it's important, like you can see kind of how the bounding box isn't working there. I do think it's important to come through and adjust that bounding box to work appropriately, because these shapes, if I came in here and made a component, I'd want this, if somebody wrote 2 lines or whatever, I'd want this to expand with it. This right now is just a 1-line thing. I do think that is way too tight for a true promo usage. I'm not going to delete it away for right now, though. I'll just keep it in its normal usage. This isn't really a component yet. What I need is I need a third piece of the puzzle. I need some text, and there's a couple of different ways that I could go about doing this. Let's do it piece by piece first, and then we'll come back and look at it another way. So I'm going to break that. I'm going to go ahead and pull in this promo website. I will use a plugin to throw some lorem ipsum in here. And this is a pretty heinous crime against humanity, if I'm being completely honest with myself. But I'm going to go ahead and save it anyway. Although I will do myself the favor of breaking it and giving it at least a modicum of self-respect. There we go. So a little bit of spacing there. It works fine. I would group this together as a unit, and then I would make a component out of that. So this is 3 different styles that are being used together that I could use as a component, but I would not come through and make individual components out of these styles. Styles are for styles. Utilize the styles together. Styles are really the truly atomic pieces of the design. You then group the atomic pieces together to create the component. The other thing that I would mention is if we have consistency between our components or between our styles, then it makes it really easy not to do this thing where we have 3 different shapes. And I've talked with Shane about this before. I'm going to detach this instance so I can kind of create what I want to create here. So the first thing I'm going to have this label. And I want this label, I want this whole process to live basically in the same box. All right, so now I'm going to change this from section label to workshop promo, and you can see the difference between the 2 right away. Like that, this is really tight. And then I'm going to pull in Montserrat here, and it's going to get nuts because it's going to all go to that giant headline text. So I've got to come back through here. I got to detach it from that and reapply it to this promo website thing. All right, this is pretty heinous. This is not great. Although, if I just detach these styles away, the problem isn't the styles themselves, although this is not a great design. The problem is the fact that we don't have any sort of baseline grid set up here to govern these things. If we went with what they refer to as a 4 or 8 pixel grid, everything would either line up on the 4s or multiples of 4 or 8. So if I had let's say that this is 24. This naturally aligns with where I typically would like it to be. 100% of 24 in terms of line height is setting itself up to be specific to Avenir. I want to look at this and I want to say, okay, what would a multiple of 8 be on the line height? If I say 32, that pushes it down a bit. But then I can also add space between. And if I said 8, I'm starting to establish multiples of 8 all the way down. Additionally, if I said instead of this headline being 100, let's think about that. 100, 8 times 10 is 80. 8 times 13 then would be 104. All right, so it's 104. And now I want to go look at what the multiples from 100, what would that be? So I'm just going to say 104 pixels here because I do have it to be, it's rather tight. Here I basically want a negative measure, so I'm going to say 96. But I also want more space below. So instead of 8, I'll say 16. And you begin to see how this can begin to space itself out. The spacing is a little looser, and that's okay. Let's look down here at this next bit here with Montserrat. So Montserrat is at 20. What if we change that to 16, and instead of 16 on, and we said 16 on 24. And that didn't work at all because it's 24%. 24 pixels. And 16 on 24 works pretty well. Now, do you really need this headline to ever be 104? Probably not. Let's kick this down to 80. And then let's kick this down to 72 because we still want it to have that energy. All right? Now, everything here is setting up on an 8-pixel grid. There's 8 pixels. Everything is divisible by 8. 72, that's 8 times 9. This is 32, that's 8 times 4, with 16 between the paragraphs. So basically that is saying that's 8 times 2. We've still got that same 16 below, so the spacing between these two and these two is actually even. And then we have 24 as our line height here, and then we have 16 in between. So we've essentially taken the design that we had before, except we've made it to where everything can live inside of the same box, and this is going to work out great when it comes time for this content to be side by side with itself. I realize that's not really what we set out tonight to talk about baseline grid, but it does give us an opportunity to look at the other tools that are available to us in this text palette. Obviously, you can select your typography, you can select your weight, you can select your height, but this is the line height. This is the space. This is the space between these bits of typography. So if I highlight this and I say 32, taller, if I say 16, way too small. If I was going multiples of 4 instead, I could say 20. And there you go. And that's fine. It's not bad. 24 is better. It just breathes more. Obviously, if you haven't picked up, we were utilizing this horizontal spacing here. I could say 100 pixels if I wanted to and get something really crazy. I could say 10 pixels. I could also say 1 pixel. Or I could say 100%. And 100%, it's basically just the width of the character. I'm going to say 10 pixel, and we're going to leave it at that. Oh, sorry. Should highlight the whole thing. 10 pixels. Additionally, this line height is the space. It's actually paragraph height. It's a space between the paragraphs. And then this is indentation. So if I wanted to come and have an indentation on one of these, I could. Now, because this is all one paragraph, that paragraph indentation impacts everything. But I think that would change if we went through and created a specific style for this. But that's something that we can definitely look into. Also of note, it's not just about the things that you can do to the typography. It is about the things that you can do to the alignment. So you can center align, you can align right. Left align is standard. We can also center this in the center of the box. So you see that it's now got equal spacing to the top and bottom. You can also align it with the bottom. Very rarely will I do either of that. I do sometimes center align when I'm building buttons and things. Obviously, there was a number of tools available here as well. This is where we were getting our all caps. We can get rid of that title case and make it lowercase if we wanted to. We can make it title case. This is uppercase. You can also underline things here, strike through. You have alignment. We've already talked about resizing as well. You can call on for case-sensitive forms, and case-sensitive forms is just relating to other characters that are available in the alphabet that is provided. So while we've got our group here, Shane, I see you typing. Feel free to ask any and all questions. That's pretty much all I was going to walk through this evening. Oh my gosh, I'm blocking a lot of fields. Oh man, that stinks. Well, let's fix that, because I can. Yeah, I totally see it now. My picture-in-picture was getting in the way. That stinks. Let me go full screen with Figma, and hopefully that will help things. Also, if I let's not do the stroke on that. If I open up stroke though and then hide it, makes it just a little bit deeper. So now I've got the type up here. What I was pointing out, Shane, is that we have the ability for line height, letter spacing, paragraph spacing, and paragraph indentation here in this text field. We obviously know how to change fonts and change weight and change typographical size, but a lot of people are always asking, what are these controls for? Again, if I change the width here of the letter spacing, the horizontal spacing on the typography, you get something crazy like that. Very David Carson. If I change the height, I'm changing the space here between the paragraphs. So if I changed it to 32, you see that the whole paragraph changes though, and that's because these things are all there's no specific styles that have been applied to these. These are all different styles that are built in the same shape. So you would need to create text styles that were really altered for this dynamic. So if we said section label, there's section label, but section label is automatically taking on other dynamics. The same thing with if we said here with web promo headline, that's changing. And then if we brought in, I think this is website, promo website, obviously that pulls in that old style too. I really think it's much better. It creates a much more unified feel if we work in eights. Eights is something that eights or tens, fours, anything that has a consistency to it. I think you're going to see a lot of benefit from doing it that way. So what you choose is up to you, but I would encourage you to find something to utilize and then build around that. All right. Any other questions before we wrap this thing up? I really, my goal here tonight was to get into some typographical issues that tends to OBS let you hide that. Thanks, Fonzo. I definitely I've had hotkey issues before. For instance, I'm gonna Shift 6, and now I think my face should be showing up. Well, it wasn't. Should be showing up full screen, and it's not. Let's see here. Yeah. So my hotkeys in OBS are hit and miss, to be honest with you, Fonzo. This Shift 6 should be working right now, and it is not. So that is unfortunate. But other questions before we wrap up? Yeah, you can. So Shane, to that end, you can use pixel height in all of these. That is something that that is super awesome. If you want it to come in and say, this is 16, but you could come in and say 24 pixels if you want it to, and there it is, 16. It won't take point. Sorry. I thought I'd typed in pixel, but I typed in point just out of habit. Yeah, it'll take pixels all the way around. And letter spacing, if I said 30 pixels, it does that. Now I know I shouldn't have a component that has my text styles. Yeah. Shane, we get into this realm of I'm creating a design system, and I need to have every particular thing that I'm doing needs to be a component, and that's really not the case. It needs you basically need to have the ability to take a block of type like this and apply styles to it, and then say that's a component. All right. So that's why when I'm building over here. Let's just look in here for a second. If you come in here and look at my styles, I have this overlay headline, and then I have this overlay subhead. Those are a part of the video command overlay. So, those are the things that pop in, but I use those styles inside of a component, and then that component becomes, that molecule, if I'm using the Brad Frost terms right, I really see styles. Styles are really the atomic. Styles are the atomic, and then when you use those styles together, they become the next phase of that build cycle. But I personally don't make my styles into components because I never construct that way. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Chris Courtney here, New Pragmatic. I hope this has been helpful. The Figma workshops have been a lot of fun for me. I look forward to doing more of them, but I believe we're going to wait until after Thanksgiving to have another one. So I hope to see all of you tomorrow at Feedback Loop. Yes, actually it is Feedback Loop. And until then, have a great night. See ya.